So, Fulcher Roy, Fulcher's here. Greeny Ushla. Tony Kirby will be along later, so he asked me to introduce our eminent speaker tonight. So, here we have Dr Terry Dunne, who has been here already in Kilnaboy at X-PO. You might refresh our memories about that. Who is funded, his research is funded by the Royal Irish Academy, and Terry is living in East Clare at the moment. So his area of expertise is the centenary of celebrations and the land conflict since the setting up of the state. So without more ado, just to tell you folks that there's a cup of tea later if you want to, that X-PO is, we don't charge for these events, but there's a box in the next room on the way out if you wish to contribute to keep the light on. And without further ado, Terry, thank you.
And thanks for everyone for coming out. I've only actually been here as an attendee before, so you may not remember me, but when I can, I do come to talks and walks organised by X-PO because it's a great project, and I'm quite happy to be speaking here tonight. Now, there's a couple of things about me talk. It's going to be fairly raw, because it's actually material that's fresh out of the archives. It's what I was researching literally last week. So if anyone watching this in the future on YouTube, I'll just put out a disclaimer there that I may revise some of the facts in view of future research. I'm unlikely, but it may happen. And the other thing that's a bit raw right now is my throat, because I'm rather nasty. I can come down with a nasty sore throat. Don't worry, I did a COVID test. Don't know that this is a small one, so we're all right on that score. But I'll try and persevere despite my illness. And the other thing, a couple of other things I want to say. The start of the talk is going to be a bit abstract and is going to be a bit on a national level, but we'll be moving on to local stories and what is very close and to your spirit in Kilnaboy for most of the talk. And as well as that, I just wanted to say recently published I've a collection of essays that I've edited on different aspects of the Irish Revolution, agrarian conflict, labour conflict, and I have copies to sell tonight if anyone wants it. Unfortunately, none of the book is about Clare, but there are chapters on the situation in Mayo and Galway very similar to what I'll be talking about tonight. Now, I'll go back to this picture in a while, but if you can get me to the first slide. So these are just some kind of points I wanted to make as regards thinking about what I'm going to be talking about tonight. So I want to maybe think about landscape as a historical creation, as, and this is an example which is more from my end of the county, from near Bodyke, but a process that is similar to what would have went on in other parts of the west of Ireland as well. So this area here, 200 years ago, these walls wouldn't have existed. There was actually a village here, a small clachan, and the typical sort of like hamlet of the west of Ireland. So what you would have been seeing was a lot less grass and more tillage. This would have been people's garden area, and the grazing more in the upland over here. And so these fields were put in a reorganisation by the landlord in 1840, and they're very sort of stripped, organised fields, perfect rectangles. So you see it in this part of the world as well, or this part of the country. These fields here, by contrast, I should actually be using my stick. Apologies, folks. These fields here, by contrast, 200 years ago, that was a large grazing farm, and these fields were actually put in more like 100 years ago, yeah. When that large grazing farm was broken up and redistributed to neighbouring farmers. But that wasn't actually done under the Irish Free State, that was done under the British state, the Congested Districts Board. But this process, of course, expanded, as we know, a lot under the Irish Free State. So I just want to think about landscape as something that's actually created. My partner Mags here, it's actually her one of her cousins that laid those hedges was it 1911 or 1914 when that farm has been divided up. Go on to the next slide, please. And in my other abstract concept I wanted to think about, as we're moving through the rest of the talk, which is more orientated towards local studies, local stories, is social structure, yeah? Sets of reoccurring relationships between people, yeah? Which I'm illustrating with this poster, yeah? So this is grazing to let at Ballinhinch, again, in my part of the county. We actually live quite close to Ballinhinch. So this is grazing to let in 1899 under what was known as the 11-month system, yeah? So this is land that would have been what would have been called untenanted, right? And that meant it was let out for periods of 11 months, because if you let the land out for periods of a year or more, then the person renting off you was a tenant and they had certain rights, okay? So 100 years ago there was actually a lot of land in this untenanted system. And what does this mean in terms of social structure? Well, this man here, General Gore, controlled your access to that land, and it was also through a market, yeah, so it was going to the highest bidder, yeah. I'll be getting back to General Gore. His estate and his domain was actually over in our part of the county, but he had land along the coast here, along the coast road up from Doolin, around that part where the slate meets the limestone. Yeah, I'll be talking a bit about that later. We'll have another slide. And finally, I want to think a bit about, as we go through the talk, about social movement, collective action, conflict, about people coming together to achieve a certain end in conflict with other people. Couldn't get a suitable illustration from Clare in the 1920s, so I'm ashamed to say I was doing this at the last minute. But here's a poster from Clare, which is on the borders of Laois and Carlow, from April 1920. At the 18th of April 1920, as you see here, it's a demonstration for the land for the people. A monster demonstration will be held in Clare. Now, of course, we often, when we hear the land for the people, we think of the land war, we think of 1879, yeah, but the big theme of this talk today, and the big theme of the book as well, is that this was going on well into the 1920s as well. Now, so...
The reason
Oh, yeah.
was going to be by summertime.
There we go, yes.
Summertime.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Did they only just introduce the clock moving around that time? I
Yeah,
think they
the
introduced
First
it
World
for
War,
the First World War.
1914, yeah.
Yeah.
Was that what?
Yeah.
Sorry, we'll go to the next one, right? So, just before the period of the Irish Revolution and just before the Home Rule crisis, the First World War, 1916 and all that, we had the Ranch War, okay? And what the Ranch War was about, it was about disputes over access to land, yeah? But we're not talking necessarily between tenant and landlord now. We're talking about this untenanted land that I spoke of. We're talking about non-residential farms, which is where, say, I might have a farm in one place, my home farm, and another couple of farms in other places, like maybe up here for Winterridge or something, and this being seen as a me monopolising resources that other people could have access to, and also lands which someone else had been evicted from decades previous. And one thing I found, now I didn't find this as yet in Clare, I'm sure I will find it in Clare, but I found in when researching in the Midlands is when I say lands in dispute that people could have been evicted from years previously, I mean it could have been decades previously. Like we're talking about someone coming back saying that their grandfather had this in 1870 and it's now 1920. There was even one instance where like a guy came back to the area his people had migrated from. Like he had a job in Guinness Brewery, you know, but it was like in the context of the revolution. He was like, "I'm coming back to where my grandfather was evicted from because that was an injustice in his eye." Now, one thing we can see, of course, from this map. So the larger circles are how many cattle drives took place in annually or in a 3-year period. Yeah, I'll talk about cattle drives in a minute. But you can see, as regards the Ranch War, Clare was a leading county. Yeah, the larger the circle, the more there was going on. So, and we're talking Clare, Galway, Roscommon, North Midlands. Yeah, so basically the beef territory. You can see very little going on in more tillage and dairy counties. The other interesting thing about that map, there's a number of interesting things about it, but it's very distinct from if you see a map of where a couple of years later, what are the real IRA strongholds in the Tan War, yeah, with the exception of County Clare, and maybe to some extent, you know, maybe some of these counties later on, yeah, in the Tan War. But like, I mean, if we look at like West Cork, you know, has very, very low activity in the Ranch War. Tipperary, Limerick, you know, Kerry, not the leading counties in this. And the other thing I'd say about the Ranch War is people may know the song "The Dueling Cattle Drive." Yeah, from this period. Yeah, not sure was that 1910 or 1914, but it's been recorded in recent years as well. And so that was on Henry Valentine McNamara's land in Doolin, and is well remembered. And so your basic tactic, or the basic tactic used by these people who were disputing some people's possession of these lands in the Ranch War, was the cattle drive. And the cattle drive meant simply going out to these lands that they maintained that they had a better claim to and removing the stock off them. Yeah. Now, sometimes there'd be a highly kind of ritualised form of that like you'd go out with a couple of bands, yeah, you'd move the stock, and it's not like you're just putting them out to the roadside. It's like you're moving them to the front lawn of the owner of the animals, kind of make the point, right? Now, that's in one form, like it would in other years or in other instances it'd just be more chaotic, yeah. So that's kind of like 1908, 1909, 1910, but it comes back big time in 1918 and 1920 and 1922. Now, do we have another slide there, or no? So I have an example now of how this seemed in this part of the world, yeah, because if you had suffered damage to your property between the truce in the summer of 21 and the end of the Civil War in 23, right, there was a process by which you could apply for compensation from the state. Okay, there were a couple of different processes. You could apply for compensation from the Irish Free State, and there was another one where you could apply for compensation from the British state. To apply for compensation from the British state, you had to pretend to be a loyalist. Sometimes you might have been a loyalist, but you know, if you wanted the money, you had to say certain things as well. Anyways, so this is part, what I have here for you now is part of this compensation process, and is a statement made to the guards in Corofin in January 1925. It's a statement made by a man called James Nagle, and who was a farmer living at Elmvale, Kilnaboy, Corofin, which is just up there and around the corner, if I'm right. Yeah.
You found right anyway.
So what he said, and this is just part of it. I'm a farmer living at Elmvale, Kilnaboy, Corofin, County Clare. I have a farm at Ballygastle, Lisdoonvarna, County Clare. I had Ballygastle farm stocked with 86 sheep, 26 lambs, 8 cattle, a 1-year-old horse, and on the 7th of the 4th, 22, all the above stock were driven off the farm in Ballycastle. They were brought to my place at Elmvale, Kilnaboy by my herdsman, Patrick Scallon. And this again is very typical. So he has his farm in Corofin, and then over in Lisdoonvarna he has another farm with a herdsman living on that farm, minding his animals over there. Typically the herdsmen, like, we can kind of think of herdsmen as an employee, but they were a cut above your average employee, and they'd often have, like, it'd often be some of the animals were belonging to, they got belonging to Nagle in this case, and some of the animals would be belonging to the herdsman, so you had the right to put in some of your animals there as well, right? So anyways, Patrick Scanlon brings his stock to Elmvale, yeah? And so he goes on, Ballygastle farm was 14 months derelict, as I was afraid to stock it again. I lost half my meadows at Elmvale in supporting the above driven stock, which was a great loss to me. And he goes on to say then, I do not know the parties who drove my stock. In my opinion, the reason my stock was driven was that in the years 1922, all unoccupied farms in Lisdoonvarna district were driven, right? So this is again, if you're from Corofin and you have a large farm in Corofin, and then you have another property in Lisdoonvarna, and some people in Lisdoonvarna taking umbrage at that. Now, can we go back to the first slide, please? Right. So this, I'm not 100% sure. This is a unit of the Free State Army or the National Army, yeah? I'm not 100% sure if it's the Special Infantry Corps, but given what they're doing, it's likely that it is indeed the Special Infantry Corps, yeah? I'll be talking a bit there about the Special Infantry Corps, because we're fine there. This is my Wisk house in Quinn, and the lady who owned the house was kidnapped out of it in a land dispute in the fall of 1923, and then in retaliation some of her neighbours, I think 8 or 9 or maybe a dozen guys, were also kidnapped, yeah, and because of the counter kidnapping, I think she was released, yeah. I'm not going, I haven't researched that too much, and I'm not going into it because it didn't happen in this area, but it's quite rare to have a picture of the Special Infantry Corps, to my knowledge. And so they were founded in January 1923, right? And they ran through, they were wound up in November 1923, right? So they just pretty much ran for that year, yeah? And the main ministers pushing for it were Paddy Hogan, who was the Minister for Agriculture and who had Clare connections, and Kevin O'Higgins, who was the Minister for Home Affairs, or Justice Minister as we call him now. And the title of my talk, A Bad Patch, comes from how the Minister for Home Affairs, Kevin O'Higgins, described Clare. He didn't say it was altogether a bad patch, but it was a place that had bad patches in it. But that was later on in the 1920s. So it was a special unit of the army that was to function as a kind of continental style gendarmerie, okay? It was to deal with agrarian unrest, labour unrest, non-payment of rates, banditry. It was to act in aid of the civil power, right? So these guys are not fighting the IRA or the irregulars as they would have been known by the Free State Army, okay? Therefore, to deal with kind of popular protest and non-payment of rates and putsching making, and but also at the time there was there was this social protest, but there also would have been there would have been crime waves, yeah. So it was also a kind of more generalised banditry they were to deal with. And Hogan, incidentally, he was quite explicit about what he was out to do, yeah. I'm not going to quote him exactly, but he basically said, like, we saw how the Brits tried to deal with this type of stuff, yeah, and they were way too liberal. We're going to go in with a mail fist, and we're going to put a stop to it, yeah. Which is kind of a remarkable thing for an Irish government minister to be saying in 1923. But when he was talking about the Brits being too soft, he's not talking about the Black and Tans, he's talking about how they would have dealt with the Ranch War, you know, or like going through due process and all the like of that. Special Infantry Corps didn't do things that way. So the Special Infantry Corps, now, they were used by other units of the army to kind of get rid of the more, or certainly a perception that they were used by other units of the army to get rid of their less, their more troublesome staff, essentially, right? Or staff that were seen as more troublesome. So maybe if you had a good IRA record, but you weren't really settling into being in a conventional army, the Special Infantry Corps is looking for people, so your boss might shift you there, yeah. I've also heard it suggested that a lot of travellers ended up there because the officers in the normal units of the army didn't want them, yeah. And that's not my own research now. So there were supposed to be about 4,000 men, but they never made the full complement. That was a paper strength. They were still shy of 3,000 by July 1923. And their largest deployments were in Waterford and Dundalk. So they were organised into units, first of all. Yeah, they were just called units, and later they reorganised themselves. But the first units, that's from February 1923, were in Renmore and Galway. There's a number 2 unit in Mullingar, and then number 3 unit was based in Ennis, in the county club in Ennis, yeah. And so if we go back to the Ranch War graphic there, you can see where they're basing the first units kind of fits that pattern, yeah. It's Clare, Galway, and the North Midlands. So each will be, we go back to the Special Infantry Corps picture there, will be the first picture.
Do we? Okay.
Yeah, just so each unit had about 40 to 60 men, 4 Crossley tenders, a few Ford motor touring cars as well, and then they were reorganised into a kind of normal army structure with battalions and companies from June 1923 onwards. Right. So for their own statistics, from February 1923 to the end of September 1923, they took 173 prisoners from what they called agrarian trouble. Yeah. A further 62 who were curfew breakers in what they call the strike area, which most likely is Waterford, but could be some people in South Kildare and the Kilkenny-Tipperary border as well. 8 of whom they call political prisoners, and 128 miscellaneous. And as I say, the miscellaneous could include ordinary decent criminals as well, yeah, because there was just a kind of crime wave going on, and not just in 1923, but during the whole of the revolutionary period. So there was ordinary crime they had to deal with also, yeah, crime, shall I say. And of those 271 prisoners, there were still 152 in custody at the end of September, yeah. And when I say prisoners, like, these people were interned in the same camps as the irregular, so-called irregular IRA would be interned in, right? So a bunch of guys that were lifted in this area that I'm going to be talking about in a minute were sent to Newbridge, and then some fellas that were lifted over in East Clare were sent to Dundalk, yeah. Then in terms of livestock seized, right? So as well as seizing people, their big thing was seizing livestock. And so that could be livestock that was put onto the lands, illegally grazing on the lands that that the owner or tenant of those lands had their stock driven off, yeah. Or it could be that you hadn't paid your rates and they were going to take some of your animals until you paid your rates. Now, I think it was more the illegal grazing, and certainly in this area it was more illegal grazing than non-payment of rates. So in terms of livestock seized in those 8 months, they seized 702 cows, 40 heifers, 131 calves, 470 sheep, 124 horses, 52 yearlings, 22 donkeys, 3 goats, and 9 pigs. And that's a total of 1,553 animals. So that's mostly animals that were illegally grazing, and some of them that were impounded for non-payment of rates. And the ones that were, like, if it was non-payment of rates, they could give the animal back to you once you paid. And if there were animals that were illegally grazing, what they did is they brought them to the nearest train station, put them on a train, sent them to the North Wall in Dublin, and sent them to England. Yeah.
And what, sorry?
Sent them to England and sold them.
Alright.
Yeah. Which, like, there's no due process or anything like that here. Like, the people being arrested or being interned, the animals are just being seized, put on a train and sold. Right. So this, you understand now where I'm saying Hogan was saying that we're going to go in, we're going to go in a male fist. Yeah. Right. Oh, they also seized 2 illegal stills, 60 gallons of poaching, and a treacle wash. I think a treacle wash is to do with making poaching, isn't it? Yeah. That was all up in Mayo and Galway.
I bet that didn't go to England.
It's not very impressive seizure, right, either.
So as I was saying, in Clare, the main focus was on lands that had been taken over during the course of the revolution. Yeah. So where the owners or the tenant had been effectively dispossessed for a period of time, and someone else moved their own animals in. So the principal roles in Clare were arresting and interning people who had been suspected of being involved in illegal grazing, or just taking the animals off the lands, or just simply patrolling around the place. So I'm interested in the lists of the prisoners they arrested, to see who was suspected of being involved in this activity, and also what lands were they patrolling out to see whose lands were being targeted in these cattle drives. Okay. And I'm going to talk about a few of them in a bit, a few of those people. But then when they came to do the reorganisation into this normal kind of army battalion structure in June, there's some interesting letters in say the Special Infantry Corps material is in the military archives in the barracks in Rathmines. And so there's some interesting letters there as regards how the authorities were discussing what the problem was, and particularly the problem as regards North Clare. And it's in context to that reorganisation. So there's a letter from the G. Dwyer, who's Chief Superintendent of the Civic Guard for Clare, and he's writing in late May 1923, and he's kind of concerned about the situation where the Special Infantry Corps are going to be based in the 10th Battalion of the Special Infantry Corps are going to be based in Limerick with an outpost in Ennis, and he wants them based in Ennis with an outpost in Lisdoonvarna. Okay, and it's interesting. It's interesting how he sees the problem of what's going on. Okay, so he says the lands of Tuvahara, and Kilfanora are cleared of the cattle of the illegal grazers. I believe that the members of the grazing clubs who were not arrested will not attempt to put cattle back on these lands, but they will confine their operations to preventing the owners from making use of the same. This they can easily do by driving the cattle off the lands. Unless there is some special infantry close at hand, it will be hard to prevent them. The owners of these lands are anxious to stock them with cattle, but do not care to do so unless there is some prospect of getting protection. Now, here's the particularly interesting bit. He says the land that all the row is about is mostly studded with limestone rock and is only fit for grazing.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I consider the government will eventually have to do something in the line of splitting it up and parsing it out in smaller holdings. Otherwise, this trouble will be cropping up periodically, right? So he's saying that as well as the repressive role, they have to introduce some kind of reform, and they have to redistribute land. Now he's talking about it only being fit for grazing, because at the time there was the idea that a small farm would be based around mixed tillage, yeah, and there'd be a lot more intensive use of the land, because with the idea was that a small farm had access to more labour, so you had more labour per area, and and you could be doing market gardening or selling poultry and pigs and so on and so forth, right? Because this was before, of course, poultry and pigs were all kept in battery farms. So that's an interesting little letter there. There's another one, and a lot of this discussion. It's not just the military. It takes in a lot of the guards, the Ministry for Home Affairs, but also very much the Minister for Agriculture. Yeah, and there's a guy from the Department of Agriculture who's also writing in saying that Kilfenora is the centre around which practically all the land trouble in North Clare exists.
Oh,
So we want a special infantry corps base up there, right? Now, and this is another particularly interesting letter I came across is from the State Solicitor and Bindon Street in Ennis, right? And he writes up to the Minister of Home Affairs and Government Buildings in Dublin, and he's writing about a Frank Cahir, is it Cahir or Care?
Clare,
Of Bunny Craggy, Ennis. And by the way, if anyone is familiar with the, I'm sure plenty of people are with the book Leash, not Leash, I mean Clare, not Leash, folks. I've got to remember that. Clare History and Society, put out by Geography Publications. Well, there's a chapter in it about land conflict in Clare in the 1920s. Written the late 1920s rather than this one I'm talking about now, written by a descendant of this man here, or not necessarily a descendant. It could be a grandnephew or someone, but someone from his family. So Mr. Frank Cahir of Bunny Craggy, Ennis, has instructed me to offer you a house in his property at Fáin Rúisc near Ballyvaughan in this county for a military post. Now I think that Fáin Rúisc is probably Fáin Rúisc near Puacapel on one side of the Cahir Valley.
Yeah.
There's another Fáin Rúisc over near Fenor, but I think it's the one near Puacapel. Anyways, the house is on the lands of Fáin Rúisc, off which Mr. Cahill's cattle were driven by armed men over 3 years ago, and which he has not made any use of since, although he has paid the rent and rates up to the date. The military made a raid on the place about 6 months ago, and they seized some cattle which the herdsman claimed as his own, though he told Mr. Cahir over 3 years ago he no longer heard the place from. And since the raid by the military, Mr. Cahir has been warned not to put stock on the land, or they and perhaps himself will be shot. I've been speaking to the Chief Superintendent of Civic Guards Ennis, who stated to me that he would approve of a military post in the district, as the district is one which has been very much disturbed for years, and he says that a military post would have a healthy effect in the district. Right? So that's what the State Solicitor wants, right? But what's quite interesting is the response from the Army, okay? So this is from the General Officer Commanding in Limerick. This letter is interesting because it shows what the problem was from the point of view of the authorities. I've made inquiries into this matter, as a result of which I'm of the opinion that the circumstances do not necessitate the establishment of a military post on this farm, for the present at least. I am of the opinion that the Civic Guard should be able to cope with this matter. I would not attach too much importance to the alleged threat to shoot Mr. Cahir or his cattle, as so many similar threats have been floating around Clare in recent times that it would take 40,000 soldiers to protect all the recipients. The most likely thing to occur in the event of Mr. Cahir stocking his farm is that the stock may be driven. No doubt the Civic Guard at Ballyvaughan are aware of the names of the parties who would be likely to attempt anything of this nature, and I submit that if necessary the military could then assist the guards and bring the culprits to justice. It would probably be admitted that Mr. Cahir's enemies would find some opportunity to shoot him or his cattle, even when an expensive isolated military post had been established on his farm. He goes on to say, I may mention the almost utter helplessness of trying to manage a small post at Fáin Rúisc. This place is miles from any village or any shop of any description. With the present transport facilities, they were always complaining about their costly tenders breaking down and the roads being so bad. I'm afraid that a post on this farm would be anything but a success. So on a kind of similar point, or maybe not as explicit as the one the guard was making earlier, and the Chief Superintendent asked, is that he sees this as a problem that can't that can't be solved just by sending the army in. Yeah, but they have limited capacity to enforce, though some capacity, right? So now, can we move on there a few, please, Max? I'm going to talk a bit about a man not too far from here who was the victim of some of this cattle driving. The 10th of February 1923, there was a special infantry raid for illegally grazing stock in Poolbawn, which is mostly upland, townland, right part of Ailey, basically. Poolbawn. I could be mispronouncing it.
Yeah, power barn.
Poolbawn, okay.
Where is it?
Power barn.
And they went.
Outside Corofin.
There's two Poolbawns. There's one that's south of Corofin, I think there might be, and this one is further north near Ailey, on the way to Bell Harbour.
Alright, yeah, okay.
You mean like the cave maybe, yeah.
There's an Ailey mountain, and this is on the south
Yeah,
side.
there is, that's where the cave is, the famous cave.
Yeah.
We'll hear it years.
So they went up there, they visited there with Corbett as a guide. The guide also went to the lands of Mr. Bakey. Bakey, yeah, in the adjacent townland of Dean and Beg. Now, so this was a very early action of the Special Infantry Corps in Clare, right? So I think it might have been the first raid that they made on any of these farms that had been taken over. So who was William James Corbett? Well, he's described in his claim for compensation from the British state as a gentleman farmer and a breeder of thoroughbred horses. So he claimed for damages from the Irish Free State for 11 cattle drives between the 20th of April 1922 and the 16th of July 1922. Right? He actually made 19 and claims for damages in total. 11 of them were to do with cattle drives. These drives were in Kilnaboy, which is west of Corofin, Auchavinin and Dealanmore, which are north of Carron towards Bell Harbour, and one in Derrynavah, which is on the Carr Valley. And in 1914, or from 1914, he had 255 acres in Dealanmore. He was renting them off Sir William J. McMahon. And from 1902 or 1897 or thereabouts, he had 706 acres in nearby Auchavinin, renting off Marcus Patterson of Clifton House, Corofin. Kilnaboy is west of Corofin along the route of the old railway, and it's notable that in the months where those cattle drives were happening, there was sniping directed presumably by local people at both the IRA and the National Army when they were trying to stop cattle drives from happening. Now, Wilbrook House, which was Corbett's residence, had been burned down in July 1921. It was burned down by the IRA, and there's a number of reasons advanced for why it was burned down. It was going to be occupied by the Tans as a base. William Corbett had refused to resign his position as a Justice of the Peace, and there was a degree of pressure put on people to resign those positions, or for agrarian reasons. So that's where he was now. That's where he was living at the time of the 1911 census. And I should point out now when I'm talking about William Corbett, because there's an assumption, I think, a lot of the time that this is directed towards that when there's this unrest in the 1920s, it may be directed towards people who are part of a religious minority or landlords or former landlords. William Corbett was a Roman Catholic and a tenant farmer. Yeah, so he was a tenant of these properties. Yeah. Large farmer certainly, but a tenant farmer. So, yeah, he was living here at the time of the 1911 census. In the time of the 1901 census, he was in next slide please, Liscalon, which is also along that road, and that's his, sorry, here's the stick, that's his house there. He was aged 35 in 1901, married to a Dilly aged 22, and he lived in a 5-roomed, second-class house with 4 servants, 2 stables, a coach house, a harness room, 2 cows houses, a calf house, and a fowl house. And by the 1911 census, he was in Wilbrook, which we saw in the previous slide, or well, we saw where it was in the previous slide, I should say, which is a first class 12-roomed house with 5 servants, 12 stables, a coach house, a harness room, 2 cow houses, a dairy, a piggery, 2 fowl houses, a boiling house, 2 sheds and 3 stores. So he certainly came up in the world. Yeah. So what was that now? He went from 2 stables to 12, and to a second class, from a second class house to a first class house. He also purportedly aged 15 years between the 1901 and 1911 census, and had a 3-year-old son. I can't comment on if there's any connection between having a 3-year-old son and aging an extra 5 years. Now, he had some success as a horse breeder. Bad Mark, which he trained, won the Majesty's Plate at the Curragh in 1913. And if you look for him in the newspapers, where the newspapers are digitised, it's very handy to find people. Unfortunately, the Clare local newspapers aren't. And you'll see mention of him, you know, bringing his animals to shows and whatnot, and winning awards. He was then widowed, and he remarried with Margaret Marshall, who herself was widowed. In February 1921, they got married in the Church of the Catholic University in Dublin, which I think is kind of a strange place for 2 people residing in Clare to be married. If anyone has any ideas as to why that might be, interested in hearing them. And then there's actually another sort of dimension to this story. Margaret Marshall, the widow, and that he married, was the widow of Isaac Marshall, who was briefly the owner of the Queen's Hotel in Ennis, and he died by his own hands in the grounds of the hotel. Okay, and the story of this hotel proprietor killing himself was used by James Joyce as the model for the father of Leopold Bloom in Ulysses. Yeah, so just this kind of random vignette entered my research there when I was searching for these people. I wasn't expecting that. Now, Corbett very much stood his ground as regards getting compensation. Yeah, particularly as regards getting compensation for damage to his orchard and gardens. Because subsequently to his house being burned, his orchard and gardens were raided, seemingly by school children, and there was lots of to and fro in the compensation files as to how much damage, if any, had actually been caused by these school children, who actually done it, and whether it was eligible for compensation, which it wasn't. Like the compensation is very. The Act is very specific that this is compensation if damage to your property had been caused during a rebellion against the provisional government or the Free State government, or during an armed clash between such rebels and the National Army, not by school children robbing apples. And also, if you look at the documents, it's they send out valuers and they send out the guards, and it seems that not that much damage was done, but they felt that it was going to cost too much stopping him, and he had been the victim of malicious injury, so they kind of let him away with it, and he got £65 cost and damages for the orchard and garden. It's unclear sometimes if the garden was in Wilbrook or if it was in Liscalan. There's certainly little trees there in Liscalan. You see this a lot in the compensation material. Like, obviously people are trying to put in a claim for as much as they can get, and then there's some pushback from the state. And Corbett was actually born in Victoria, Australia, and seemingly the family had made their money from mining in Australia. He died in September 1927, and burial after service in Ratchurch actually took place in Tulla, which surprised me. I haven't found any record of a grave there, but there are Corbett graves in Tulla going back into the 18th century. Now, there's a letter from the sergeant in Corofin. As I say, the guards would go out and investigate how much damage had been caused and who was responsible for it. So there's a letter from the sergeant in Corofin as regards the cattle drives in the summer of 1922 on Corbett's lands in Craggan on Boy. And what the sergeant says to the superintendent in Stoney is these cattle were not driven by any party who were out in revolt against the government, but by the small farmers and landless men who live near this farm. Of course, these had irregular sympathies for the reason that they were out to take possession of land and illegally graze it during the disturbed period, right? So yeah, small farmers and landless men, right? I'd say certainly to a degree, but I'm going to complicate that picture slightly, and we're going to look at who was involved in some of this, or who the state claimed was involved in some of it when they arrested them and put them in prison. Yeah. So, yeah, we go to the next slide. Right. So these are 17 men arrested for the forcible grazing of land on the 19th of February 1923. They're what the authorities called the Kilmoon Club. And Kilmoon is... Yeah, well, just before you get to this, just leave Alva just before you get to this environment.
Hillside.
Yeah.
Up the old church there too, church yard.
And the old... Oh, there's two churches. There's a 19th century one and an old one. Yeah,
very
the
old
19th century one is actually important to the story. So, anyways, yeah. So these are the people arrested. Now, so the claim was that they had taken over the properties, okay, and that's not just necessarily Corbett, or not necessarily just Corbett or Nagel. There's lots of more people. Also Gore, as I mentioned earlier. The claim was they'd taken over the properties, but then themselves had sublet the properties, right? And they also that they had the collusion of the herdsmen in doing so, right? So as I say, we have to remember that, as I was saying earlier, that the herdsmen are kind of a cut above just being an employee, that they would have had some stock in the farms themselves, right? Now, I've not been able to, so the first fellow we have here is Edward Lafferty of Kilmoon, who is described as the present secretary and treasurer of Kilmoon Club, which must have made the committee meetings very fast and efficient. I have not been able to find an Edward Lafferty. No, sorry, I wrote that wrong. They described him as Edmund Lafferty. I've not been able to find an Edmund Lafferty, but I have found an Edward Lafferty. I'd say they just got confused. They probably went by the name of the Tuvera Cooperative Land Committee. Tuvera is the name of the 19th century church. There may be the old church as well.
Tuvera.
Yeah, I probably need to actually have a recorder here to learn how to pronounce some of these place names and surnames. But anyways, so who we have is Michael and Anne of Poolbawn, Karen is a herd, a Thomas K of Ockavin, Bell Harbour. I mean, that's not actually in Bell Harbour, but you know, they didn't necessarily know where they were going up here. Tom Kearns of Abbey, which I'm guessing is Abbey Hill. A couple of McGanns of Ockavin, and again we'll remember the Ockavin land, Corbett's lands in Ockavin were some of them targeted. There's a Patrick Hines in Carron, we'll get back to him in a minute. John Considine of Kilfenora is a farmer and merchant. Fred O'Brien of Ballinacassa, I don't know where that is.
Could be, yeah.
Where?
Probably Ballinaccara,
maybe.
The name Fred was always there in the O'Briens of Ballinaccara.
Yeah.
Ballinaccara. Okay, well I'll write that down and we'll talk
Maybe in
afterwards.
Kilfenora Parish.
Yeah.
And John Burke of Kilfenora, and this is interesting, like, you know, sorry, we've got away from small farmers and landless men here, he's a merchant. A Patrick Cusick of Doolin or Fisher Street, and farmer. A John Guthrie of Listonvarna, small farmer and labourer. A Pat O'Connor of Ballytoig, that's near Kilmoon. A Pat Burke of Ballytoig, near Kilmoon. A Pat Candy of Ballytoig. Michael Williams of Listonvarna, and the two Laffertys. So what I've done with these guys is I've got this list of names, and I've been looking at who they are in the 1901 census, the 1911 census, comparing them as well against the military archives and online. You can see the military service pension records to see if any of them were in the IRA. They weren't. As far as I can see, this is an older cohort. Yeah. These are not.
It's in age, you mean?
Yes, these are not the young lads in the certain 1990, right?
Oh, on the fields as well, yeah.
So, what can we say about some of these fellas? So Fred O'Brien here, it says in the list they were arrested on the 17th of February. Fred O'Brien was actually arrested earlier. He was arrested on the 10th when they went out to Corbett's lands that are by, what do we call it again? Pool Bawn, is it?
Bawn, yeah.
Yeah, outside Alloy. There's a subsequent incident which I haven't researched yet, where while they're carrying him around in their Crossley tender, they shoot his brother, yeah, and there seems to be some kind of altercation, and his brother is shot dead. That's according to the latest documents I've seen.
Yeah. That monument is above near Limina. He's one of the O'Brien's, Ballinacurra, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Albert O'Brien was shot there. Beside the Limina Castle.
Okay.
The monument is there on the side of the road, like, yeah.
So
He's definitely an O'Brien from Ballinacurra. Yeah.
Okay. We'll talk afterwards, because I didn't know that story. I just saw a document about it.
Yeah.
Last week or the week before. So that's the story with that man. Patrick Hines here, yeah. I'll get to him in a minute. Oh yeah, there's Lafferty. Now, I mean, as I say, I put the disclaimer there at the start of the talk for anyone watching this on YouTube, but Lafferty, in that area there's only 3 other families of Lafferty, right? Not this family, but 2 others in Doolin are heavily involved in the Doolin Company, the IRA. So I'm assuming that they're cousins, and this is perhaps what gives this particular Lafferty some degree of influence. But as I say, that's a supposition on my part. Patrick Hines. Oh yeah, John Burke. We were going to talk about John Burke. Yeah, so landless men and small farmers. John Burke, as we can actually say, is a merchant. Can we show
Any books from
the next one? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So fugitives from the bullock pastures is a description given by Lawrence Ginnell, who was a United Irish League MP, and is one of the few people from the United Irish League that went over to Sinn Féin. It's how in a pamphlet in 1917 he described these people that were involved in the cattle drives, or the small farmers who needed to benefit from land redistribution. But you probably wouldn't call John Burke a fugitive from a bullock pasture, as he seems to be a prosperous merchant. And this is actually a poster produced by him, so it's John Burke, General Merchant, Kilfenora, County Clare, and you see it's just a wee poster of like the Avena de Valera there, the very 1916 leaders and so on, including, yeah, that there, the lad whose government put him in jail. But anyways, we'll go back to the next one.
Go back.
Yeah, we'll go back one there, yeah. So, I think maybe for some of the people in this area, the fugitives from bullock pastures was true, because I mean there's some good land there, but there's a lot of bog, and there's a lot of ruined houses that were already ruined before the 1920s. And we might go back to the list of names. So finally, I just want to talk a bit about Patrick Hines in Cairn, yeah, because there's a bit of correspondence about him, because they never arrested a Patrick Hines at all, and they arrested a John Hines, and there being no Patrick Hines in the family, they just seemingly picked another one, and he was also arrested and held longer than the rest of them. He was put in the prison. The other guys were released, but he wasn't released, seemingly because of letters that came to him into him from prison from people with anti-treaty sympathies or some such. And so there's a bit of correspondence from his sister, and also the parish priest, saying that, you know, I'm not saying that you were wrong to pick these guys up, but you've after leaving this guy in jail and you've released everyone else. So Delia Hines was his sister, and she has a grand turn in rhetoric in her letter up to the government. So she concludes with, now I've decided to quit this unfortunate country, complaining about her brother being maltreated in Ennis, held in prison, and not being able to have any communication with him. Now I have decided to quit this unfortunate country. I would consider it a happier fate to be devoured by ravening wolves in another country than to put up this treatment from these creatures who call themselves Irishmen. Yeah, it's interesting, some of the rhetoric people employ. There's another letter of complaint that's rather good. Can we skip ahead there? So there's the Gore estate as well. That's actually General Gore that we saw at the start of the talk, and his auction. That's his grave, which is close to where we live. So they owned, as well as owning the land around near us in O'Callaghan's Mills. They also had land over in the northwest. Do you know, just as you're driving up the coast road and you're into the kind of limestone rock, and there's a bit of a cliff and a place where people park and go down to
Ballyryan.
Could be Ballylacken as Ballylacken around there as well.
Along the coast there, is it?
Yeah, Ballyryan is
Ballyreen.
Ballyreen. Okay.
Yeah, but
Sounds like Ballyreen.
Ballyryan at the time.
Ballyryan, yeah.
That's one of the townlands we're talking about, all right. And it stretches down towards Doolin as well, I think.
Yeah.
So there's a James Woods. It was another man who was writing letters of complaint, like the letters from Delia Hines, and I really I like his letters because his some of his land, or some of his animals, or his father's animals, had been seized off Ballyryan or Ballyreen by the Special Infantry Corps, and he's writing in letters one time saying that what a great supporter of the government he is, and this must be a terrible mistake, and other letters with the same type of rhetoric as Delia Hines was using. But my favourite part of them, I should have a picture of my PowerPoint really, is this guy was a sergeant in the Guards, based in the Garda Training Centre in the Phoenix Park. Yeah, he was actually writing the letters of complaint to the army using Garda headed note paper. I don't know if he got in trouble for it. I'll wrap up now, but I'd be very interested in hearing from people comments and questions and local knowledge about this stuff. But I will just go on to the last slide. And that's my email and my phone number and where you'll find me on social media if anyone has any other questions that we don't get to tonight, or any other further information, you can take that down. And I also, as I said, I just have an edited volume out, which has very little on Clare, but a lot on the similar stuff going on in other parts of the west of Ireland. Like there's a chapter on similar stuff happening in Galway, a chapter on similar stuff happening in Mayo, and it's at the specially reduced price of €20. Be €25 in the shop, €20. I'm here to you tonight. If anyone wants to grab a coffee, if you don't and you just want to pull it out of the bag and have a look, feel free as well. So, thanks everyone.
Thank you.